Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Coming You Spurs podcast. My name's Dan Tracy. I'm incredibly hoarse this week. I've got a big chest infection, but the show goes on. And that show will be for the next 45 minutes or so as we talk all things Tottenham. And boy, have we got a lot to chat about this weekend, or this week, shall I say, because win or lose, and it was a loss, we'll discuss the news. It's 3 up top this evening again, and that means leading the line from the front around that captain's armband is Carl. So Carl, how have you been since we last spoke?
Yeah, it was quite good up until Saturday lunchtime, and it had a bad vibe about it in the build up to it, didn't it? It kind of never liked Saturday lunchtime, and then unfortunately that ruined the rest of the weekend, didn't it? So hopefully we get our free therapy session, and we'll come away feeling a lot better after this.
Yes, it's the first therapy of the season. Patrick, you're back in the fold once more. How have you been these past 7 days?
Usually I'm here vibrant, full of energy, full of that pizzazz. I'm feeling a bit deflated now after that game because there's one thing to lose a football game, but there's a manner in which we lost, and it was just. So yeah, we'll get into it today. Don't want to talk too much now, but I'm okay. But obviously a bit deflated, after that performance.
Okay, mate. We'll get those energy levels back up by the end of the show, I promise. And also joining us. Making his debut, good sponsorship there, Patrick, like it. Making his debut is Jonathan Williams. He's a regular contributor to the show, and he thought, you know what, I want to crack at this. So, Jonathan, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope all is well.
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Before we get into all things Tottenham, let's get the social media bits out of the way so we can dissect Saturday and more in full. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Comedy Spurs app, where the podcast is available each and every Tuesday morning. You can, of course, follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at COYS_COM. We're on all the major audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, etc. If we're not on one, let me know. I'll get it sorted for you. And if you listen on Apple, don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating so we move up that league table. And I guess also, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode of this and our Friday previews and any other content we end up doing. Right, let's get down to business. And that business, well, I guess, Carl, what a difference an international break makes, because that bubble is well and truly burst.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? As you say, it was all leading up to this, wasn't it? To be honest, we did our preview show, didn't we? We kind of said that the omens weren't great. Last time we played Palace last season, we were top, a good run of form, and this was exactly kind of a mirror image of that, wasn't it? Top, good run of form. Nuno gets manager of the month, and you're kind of thinking we couldn't have had any more kiss of deaths, could we? But I don't think anyone could have seen the sort of performance that we ended up putting in that week. Yes, we had a lot of injuries, and I'm sure we'll get into that. And obviously they will have played their part, but it was just abject, wasn't it? And what's even worse was the fact that, for me, that was probably worse than anything we saw under Jose Mourinho. And when we thought that some of those performances were bad, I would say this is probably on a par with anything, and even worse than what he served up. The last time I remember us playing so badly against a team I don't think we should have done was when we lost 3-0 at Brighton, which was pretty much the end of Poch's era, wasn't it? And that was pretty much, yesterday was pretty much on par with that. And let's face it, if that was Jose that had served up that sort of performance at the weekend, Twitter would have exploded, and everyone would have been going mad. And the manner of the defeat's really worrying, and so I'm sure we'll get into that as we go along.
Well, let's get into it now, because Patrick, we've been mentioning the type of win. 1-0, a win is a win, and you think, brilliant, 9 points out of 9. What can possibly be wrong about that? And really, not a lot. However, as soon as you lose a game, that kind of narrative is all distorted. It's all a case of, well, actually, do you know what? The football isn't that good. We're not attacking. We're not creating. And then you kind of sort of look at it through a different lens. So is this the start of the sheen starting to slip? I'm not advocating Nuno out or anything silly like that, but people are now sort of taking a sense of realism, pragmatism, shall we say. And Saturday was quite a sobering performance, wasn't it?
That's it. I mean, when you win games, like you said, Dan, when you win, it's all brilliant and it's fantastic. 1-0s, if they're scrappy, if they're 1-0s that should have been 10-0s, if they're 1-0s that we were lucky to get a win, it all doesn't matter as long as you get that W, and the clean sheets always help as well. I mean, we had 35% possession against Man City, 42% possession against Wolves, 58% against Watford. So we weren't really dictating and dominating games. But Saturday, because we're on Monday now, 38% against Palace. And I know we played for 30 minutes with 10 men, but even when it's 11 versus 11, they outran us, they outclassed us. We were second best to everything. It's like after the first 20 minutes, we stopped pressing. Kane was just walking around like a scarecrow. It looked like he didn't want to be there. I know he wasn't getting any service, but still, I only saw him really press the ball maybe once or twice. After Lucas made that run at the players in the first couple of minutes, we pretty much did nothing. And like you said, wins will always make us look good because we can always say, oh, but this happened and that happened. But if you get the W, you get the points, we're all going to be happy and move on to the next game. But when you lose 3-0 like that, and the manner, we just crumbled. I know we went down to 10 men, but teams can still get a result with 10. We saw Chelsea do it against Liverpool. We've seen other teams do it. And we were well off it. And for me, it was worrying because Nuno just looked out of his depth. He just sat there like this for the whole game, arms folded, no emotion, no energy, no desire to change things. Even if you didn't want to bring players on and you didn't trust your creative players, at least get up and make some tweaks. You see Tuchel doing that all the time, don't you? He makes tweaks as the game's going on. In-game management was not there. Oh, man, I could go on all day. I want to let the other guys speak, but yeah, it is worrying, like Carl said. I'm hoping that it's a one-off and it's a bad day at the office and against Chelsea we raise our game. But if this is the start of things to come, then we're in for a long season, boys.
Well, Jonathan, let's bring you in because obviously it's the first time we've spoken on this platform. I know we sort of exchanged tweets, but let's gauge your reaction to the season so far. As Patrick says, it's only one defeat, so let's try and be a bit optimistic, but it's hard to be optimistic when you've lost in such a manner as you did last Saturday. So is it a sense of throwing the baby out of the bathwater? It's one defeat from 4. It's 9 points from 12 still. If you do beat Chelsea, which is going to be tough, if then you've got Arsenal as well, if you get 6 points or even 4 points from 6, things aren't that bad. But what's been your take thus far?
I've been really rather pleased so far because for the first time in a long time, it looked like we've learned how to win ugly. And we haven't done that very much over the last few seasons. We've either sort of run away with it and dominated and perhaps won by at least 2 goals, or we've lost, and often in a very depressing fashion. But that's Spurs. So I was actually really quite enthused about the start because it was something new that we haven't really seen before from our team, well, not for a very long time anyway. And I'm not sure that there's anything to worry about. It was almost like a perfect storm last week. Everything that possibly could have gone wrong went. What did we lose? 5, 6 players from the international window were no longer available for the match for a whole myriad of reasons, not all of them injuries, unfortunately. And then 15 minutes into the game, Dyer gets injured and goes off. And again, strange enough to report, he has been our defensive rock alongside Sanchez. So all of a sudden, we had a completely new centre-back pairing who hadn't played in centre-back for the whole season. So, all things considered, had we held out and got a 0-0, I wouldn't have been too dissatisfied, bearing in mind everything that was going on in the background beforehand. I do share everybody's disappointment about the lack of creativity. It was, well, just completely absent. There wasn't any, was there? There was nothing, really. Moura did a couple of runs, and that was about it. Other than that, we had seemingly no idea how we were going to score or create anything. And we'd picked 3 midfielders, all of whom are defensively minded. Do we really need 3 defensive midfielders against Crystal Palace? I didn't quite understand that selection from Nuno, but prior to the game, having won man of the match, manager of the month, who could have criticised him? So it was a strange selection, but yeah, I just think everything that possibly could have gone wrong went wrong, and I would imagine this morning in training they just drew a line underneath everything and said, "Well, that was crap, wasn't it? Let's start again." Because what else can you do? Everything was pretty much crap.
Well, Carl, we've got a comment here from Jim F. Thanks for sending this in, Jim. He sort of is inferring that the bubble's not burst yet. It is only one game, but I'm interested in what he says about selection mistakes. Yes, the selection wasn't great, and it's never great when you then lose 3-0. It's very easy to say that. However, I will play devil's advocate and say, what else could Nuno have done with such a paucity of options across the pitch?
Yeah, like as Jonathan says there, going into the game, when I saw the selection, you are sitting there thinking, wow, that central midfield position is a little bit bland and a little bit vanilla, isn't it? There's not much in there that's going to excite you. But then you are sitting there thinking, well, hang on, he's seen these players, he's worked with them. He was never going to throw Ndombele straight into the starting 11, given the kind of criticisms that had been aimed at him before the season started. So to think that he was just going to throw him in. Gil, I know we're all calling out for Hill, but again, you could sit there and go, well, do you really throw an inexperienced player into a game away from home at a tough ground? Okay, I can accept all that. What I can't accept is when you see the game is going the wrong way and going against you, and you come out, we saw 10, 15 minutes in, everything looked like it was actually going okay, wasn't it? Mora's had a couple of good runs. It's a pretty even game. You're thinking, okay, this is all right. But from that minute on, when you can see the Palace momentum building and building and building and building, and you're not getting on the ball and you're not creating anything, and then you go in at half time, you think, okay, maybe you can stir something up, change, as Patrick said, maybe later on make some tweaks. But you come out in the second half, and 10 minutes into that, you can see nothing's changing here. A manager needs to react. And for me, the biggest alarm bell is that he still just sat on his hands, did nothing, looked at it going wrong, saw that a midfield three weren't creating anything, weren't going to give us any spark. And you're looking and thinking, you got Ndombele sitting there and you got Hill. Bring one of them on at least to try and change something up. Yes, the sending off, he may say the sending off was at the point where he was going to make those changes and maybe try to change it up. But the game was gone before that sending off at that point. You could see where it was going. It was one of them that's just like, listen, the pressure's building here and we've got nothing to change this. So don't hang around, don't sit there. You've given them 10 minutes more from what you've said to them at half time. Make the change. He didn't. He sat there. Obviously, Tanganga is rash and ends up getting himself sent off. And I'm sure we'll go into that red card at some point. And at that point, then doesn't matter what change you make now, because effectively you're now in a really bad spot. He could still have brought Hill or something on, because again, it wasn't working for Dele Alli at that point, was it? It wasn't working for Winks. But I think at that point, he tried to just play it safe and think, maybe I can see if we see it out for a point now, a 0-0. And we can never do that. This is Tottenham Hotspur. We can't see a game out for a 0-0. We never have been, never will be able to, I don't think. And like I say, those decisions really, really worry me. And we'll probably might come on to this later, but, for me, this is where I'm slightly concerned about where we might be going under Nuno, and where for me, and I'm going to say it now, and this might be going big and this might be going over the top, and it isn't just reactionary to one defeat. This is why I would have preferred to have seen Potter come in and get that job, because the way I see him having Brighton set up and playing, that's the sort of football I would like to have seen us play. But yeah, if he's going to stay, because I don't think he's going to get that long. If we lose to Chelsea, which is highly likely, if we then go and lose to Arsenal as well, I think the pressure will be on Nuno very quickly this season.
Well, I mean, we can't really be talking about managers getting the boot in November, can we? Let's be honest. If he's 7th down the list in terms of our actual replacement for a manager, where on earth would you go after that? I have no idea. I mean, that's not a topic we can really go down at the moment, and I don't really hope it's a topic we do go down. You want at least a season out of Nuno, because otherwise we're reinventing the wheel and failing badly. But Patrick, in terms of failing badly, Carl touched on it there. In terms of half time, you're sort of thinking, well, at least it's half time. At that point, you'd think one change surely. Let's get a bit of vibrancy in that midfield. If it has to be Ndombele, even though he's not been featuring, so be it. Let's just get him in, get him some Premier League minutes, try and change the game. Something positive. Nothing happened. Do you think Nuno got complacent because he's thought, okay, I've won 3 on the bounce at 1-0. I only need a goal. I'll get it. I've got Harry Kane up top. Do you reckon it comes to that? Or was it a case of, I'm going to give it 10 more, then that kind of backfired? Where do you think it all went wrong in that aspect?
You know what, Dan? I honestly can't tell you, because watching his reaction, his body language, I just don't understand what was going on. I mean, we were lucky. Let's be honest. We were lucky to go in 0-0 at half time. Conor Gallagher should have scored. I don't know how he didn't. Hugo Lloris, great save, or Gallagher not really aiming for the roof of the net or any corner or angle. 0-0 at half time. We kind of got lucky with that. Cool, we regroup, we're away from home, hostile environment, London derby. They were well and truly up for it, and we kind of looked battered and knackered after the international break. So at halftime, I thought, okay, this is when Nuno earns his coin. This is what we're going to see what he's about. Didn't make a change. Okay, we'll take that. 55th minute onwards, you've got to make a change. I know Tanganga kind of lost his head and things kind of went out the window, but still, you can still do something. We got two creative players there in Brian Gill and Ndombele. I didn't think Ndombele would come on first. Harry Winks does that. Holly, please throw that pillow, cushion, or whatever it is in the bin right now, please.
Or just put an Arsenal kit on it, Holly, for please. Just voodoo, some voodoo.
But,
for those who are listening on a podcast platform, Holly, our regular contributor, Pod Squad member, has chimed in with Harry Winks' disaster class. It continues. We'll get to that topic in a moment. Please continue.
Yeah, sorry. So 55th minute, I think Tanganga did the second. I thought it was quite harsh. I know he went in reckless, but he didn't make any contact with the player. The only thing is that referee wasn't looking to give us anything, and he kind of put himself in the spotlight just after he had done the whole pullback Zaha thing. The crowd were all over him as well. And this is what you see the difference what a crowd does, because I think last year, closed stadium behind closed doors, the referee doesn't give a second yellow there. He just gives them a warning. But the fans were on there, which is rightfully so. The fans, they made their voices heard and they did what they need to do at an away game. But yeah, I'm the Nuno thing worries me, because there's going to be games this season where we're up against it. And for me, I'm just hoping that he learns from his mistake. But I've got a Wolves fan that I speak to quite regularly, and he says this is what Nuno's about, and doesn't really react to in-game. His in-game management is poor. So that is where I'm a bit concerned. And like Carl said, I would have preferred Graham Potter. Potter wasn't my first choice, but he was on my list in my top 5 choices, because he knows the Prem inside out. He performs very well with obviously a lesser team, no disrespect to Brighton, but he knows how to play attacking football, and defensively as well, he sets up quite well. He would have been my choice if he would have stayed in Prem. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about this whole Nuno thing. I can't lie. I'm not convinced with him.
Okay then, Jonathan. Obviously, we don't want to be talking about our manager getting the boot or anything. So is the issue fundamentally not having a good transfer window? We spoke about trying to rate the transfer window last week, and we were all sort of saying, well, can't really put a figure on it because you don't know how players are going to be till the end of the season and where the team finishes, etc. So if you kind of wind it back, is it a case of actually that window wasn't as good as we first thought, and really this squad isn't up to the kind of level that we need it to be? Could change in January, but it's very hard to get players in January, isn't it? So when you're looking across the season, we'll get to Harry Kane where his mind is later on, but when you're looking at the squad on paper and the imbalance we've still got, it's a bit of a concern, isn't it?
Yes, because I think the one thing, or the two things we didn't cover in the transfer window was the creative midfielder. We haven't replaced Eriksen, and it's been 2 seasons now since he's gone. We've got nothing like it. Nobody to put that killer pass through to feed either Son or Kane. And at the same time, we lost the backup to Kane last season. And I had no problems about letting go of them, but we needed to get somebody, for heaven's sake. And I know Carl was pushing for Danny Ings, and God, that would have felt a lot better, wouldn't it, if we'd have had Ings and Kane up front at the weekend. So I think that's still a glaring issue and a glaring omission from the summer, that we're short on those 2 key personnel, and there seems nobody in the squad that can fill that hole, that can cover for that. And that's so in that respect, that's got to be a criticism of our performance in the transfer window or in the transfer market. We all knew we needed somebody, or one of those guys, and we didn't get either of them.
Well, Carl, Jim F has chimed in again. He says that 3 defensive midfielders against Crystal Palace made no sense to him. I don't think it made sense to anyone. But I think really the diamond shape didn't work either. I know he's also said that if Brian Hill isn't playing against Palace, when does he start? But in his whole season, there'll be minutes somewhere. I think everyone's a bit disappointed those minutes didn't come on Saturday when there was an apparent option where he could have just been thrust in and gone, there you go, there's your opportunity. But, you know, there's no Lo Celso. We've talked about Ndombele. Obviously, Sissoko's down the road now. He's not a part of the club. So it's kind of like, what else could we have done? Oliver Skipp, yes, he was on the pitch, but there's also his injury doubt. Was he at full fitness? Never quite in the game. Holly's also mentioned Harry Winks and his disaster class. It's slim pickings in the middle of the park, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And even, you know, let's face it, even if you had those two players, Ndombele and Lo Celso, is anyone actually been convinced by them yet to say that they could actually come in and suddenly turn a game? You know, we've seen it in flashes with Ndombele, haven't we? Where, yes, you know, he has got a creative side to him. But again, he's another player that can go missing for long periods in games if it isn't going right. Lo Celso, again, we're all still on the fence with him, aren't we? Again, you know, had a really good start to his Spurs career and was looking like that player that was going to take the ball on and do. But he is then kind of regressed slightly in his Spurs career, isn't he? Where, again, we're all looking now thinking, well, yeah, he's neat and tidy. But again, sometimes there's the killer ball or in the vital moment, that creativity isn't there. We are really lacking in that area. And, you know, as much as Holly laughed and said Winks disaster class, Winks at the weekend was no worse than Højbjerg or Oliver Skipp. You know, let's face it, none of them kind of made themselves look particularly, you know, good on the weekend. So, you know, to try and single Winks out, probably a little bit unfair after this weekend. But you've just got players in there who can't do the job that they need to. You know, even Dele Alli at the moment, again, you know, it was clear he wasn't going to work out in that wider position. You know, he needs to be in the centre, I think, behind the striker. So we do desperately lack that creative spark. Your only other hope is that Harry's dropping deep. But again, if Son's not playing, then that you can't really rely on that too much, because what's Harry dropping to supply, you know? Lucas was trying his best, and you've got to say he's had a decent start, Lucas, hasn't he? But again, he'll be another one of those players who goes really patchy. He'll have a really good run, but then he'll have a little spell where he can go missing in certain games and not deliver. The trouble is, it's not going to change, is it? You know, we're not going to go out in January and suddenly go and buy a classy, creative midfielder, because the money will be through the roof, especially if you're struggling at that point, because everyone will know Spurs really need a creative midfielder. They want our man. Okay, the money's going to go through the roof. And we know we ain't buying no one that's, you know, that, you know, the market value is that high, especially as well, that player will need to be someone in their prime now, ready to hit the ground running. And again, that isn't our philosophy. That's not the sort of talent we're looking for. I think it does spell, you know, it is worrying. I'm sure Lo Celso and Ndombele will add a little bit more into that midfield when, you know, when they're back and maybe fit. But the creative spark does worry me. And again, you know, you've only got that injury to Son or Harry Kane to really, I think, you know, you make you a bit of a blunt knife.
Patrick, is this the most important season for Lo Celso? The jury's still out. The jury can't keep being out. It's got to make a decision at some point. Is this the season where you now say to him, obviously we won't be saying to him, but the manager will say, look, there's not that many rivals for your position. It's up to you now. If you want it, go get it. But if you don't, you know, it's another unfortunate transfer bust for Spurs.
Yeah, stick or twist for him right now. I mean, we paid 40 million, and from Betis, he looked fantastic. We've seen all the clips and games. And yeah, when he first came, we saw flashes and glimpses of it. Last year was a bit stop-start because of the injuries. But when I watch him play for Argentina, he looks so much better than he does when he plays for Spurs. I don't really get it. But yeah, we need to see something now. One of these guys has got to take the game by the scruff of the neck, take the ball by the horn and get on the ball and dictate, push forward. I mean, against Crystal Palace, three similar-ish players, none of them look to get on the ball and push forward, you know, drop a shoulder, go past a player, cut the lines of the defensive zone or whatever they were doing. There was no one trying to do that. I think Skipp at one point tried to loft the ball over to Harry Kane. Didn't quite work out. Kane gave him the thumbs up, like, you know, well played or well tried. Other than that, no one tried to slip in Kane or find him. So it was, we need someone that will get in. But like Carl said, not go missing, because Ndombele's played many a game and we didn't even know he was playing. So let's not all say, we need Ndombele or we need Lo Celso, because these guys have played and still not produced. But this season, they both got to step up now. They're both, you know, considered very skillful, high asset players. We paid a lot of money between both of them. That's £100 million in talent. They've got to provide and they've got to start, chipping in with goals and assists. The talent is there. We paid good money for them. They came from, good clubs. They've got good pedigree. It's time for them to deliver. So yeah, you're right. I agree with you, Dan. It is time now for them to deliver.
Dan,
okay, well,
can I just ask, you watch an awful lot more football than I do. Where do Argentina play Lo Celso, and why don't we do the same? Because they see something in it.
I don't watch a lot of Argentinian football. Does anyone else want to answer that?
I still think he seems to play in the middle, but maybe he just gets a little bit more freedom to kind of roam a little bit in their side, where obviously, we were very rigid, weren't we, under Jose? You just got the impression that players like, listen, you're here, I don't want to see you roam too far from this, and I don't want to see you take too many risks. When I think with Argentina, there maybe is that freedom to be a little bit more expressive and be a little bit more creative. It also helps when you're playing with a raft of talent that he plays with there. I would also say though that some of that is on Lo Celso to bring that form to his Spurs game, because again, yes, you will have instructions. We know managers will give you instructions, but we've seen some, we've seen some really poor performances and poor stuff, things like running the ball out of play when he's under no pressure at all from anyone. And you just go, well, that just is way below the mark of what we expect. So, it could be, Jonathan, as you say, we need to give him a little bit more of creative freedom. He probably also needs to kind of, as we're saying, step it up this season. And if he can get back to that form he showed when he first come into the side, I remember a point, at Southampton away in the FA Cup where he run the game and was brilliant. If he can get back to that, there is a player there that can definitely add some real value to our midfield. And we've just got to hope that after this, debacle that's gone on with the COVID break and wandering off to go and play where they did, they've got to come back with their tail between their legs. And hopefully that will be an extra spur to those players to make sure, listen, we need to get back here and actually we owe this club. So let's get in and get to work.
Well, we've got a comment from Premier Hotspur TV. Thanks for sending this in. He says the weekend performance shows that we lack depth in this team, and God knows where we'll be without Kane and Son. But I want to make a case for the defence, and not a very good case because they weren't very good at the weekend. So, Jonathan, Eric Dyer gets injured early on. We're now got a real paucity of options for the weekend. But how integral was his departure early on? Was that? I wouldn't say that was the turning point. There's another one to come, which we'll get to in a moment. But obviously, after such a great start to the season, shortlisted for Player of the Month, he's then off early doors. So it's quite a blow for us to then deal with, especially with so many other absentees during the game.
I actually thought Radon came on and played pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, he did.
I hadn't seen him all season, and he came on and he looked comfortable, he looked relaxed, but also focused and on it, as you would hope a centre back would be. And I didn't, up until the penalty, I didn't have too many worries about how the defence was playing. I thought they were coping quite manfully with what was one-way traffic. Because we were providing almost no relief, no meaningful possession deep into the Palace half. And so it didn't take very long before once again the defence was under pressure, and they all did pretty well. We had Reguilon clearing the ball from under the crossbar, the save from Lloris, from Gallagher just before half time. Yes, we were under pressure too much, but that's because we lost the midfield and we lost all the possession. But other than that, I actually thought the defence had played really pretty well up until the penalty. And then once the penalty happened, we just lost control of the match completely, it seemed to me.
I think Dyer must have looked back at Lloris and say, thanks, mate, because Lloris really threw Dyer under a bus with that rollout to him, didn't he, that caused the injury. His rollout, he's then got a stretch to try and clear it away from the oncoming forward. And ultimately, it was that stretch that, allowed that collision. And I think Lloris has got away with it kind of quite lightly, and the backlash from that, because that really was just an unnecessary, unforced error from him. And, ultimately it cost us on that day, didn't it, with Dyer having to go off.
Well, that was the start of it all going wrong. Patrick, you referenced the sending off. So let's talk about the first flashpoint. Did Tanganga need to do what he did, really? Was that, I wouldn't say naivety, but he's kind of played into Zaha's hands. We know that Zaha likes to whinge. That's kind of his MO, isn't it? That's no getting away from that. And that's not us being sulky because we've got thumped at the weekend. It's just how he is. But once he's rolled up, and we'll get to the second yellow in a moment, that's the kind of, the fuse has been lit there. Did he need to light his own fuse when he did what he did?
Yeah, I think, Tanganga, I'll take nothing away from him. He's a fantastic young centre-back, and I really think he's going to have a good, bright career for us. But on Saturday, you saw the naivety and you saw the young centre-back come out of him. And I think the crowd and atmosphere and the occasion got to him. And like we said on our preview on Friday, an angry Zaha is a Zaha you don't want to face. And that gave Zaha all the fuel and the fire he needed to then step it up and pretty much toast us for the rest of the game. Tanganga, it's a bit of I understand Tanganga's frustration. Lucas was injured. The guys could clearly see he was down and he was hurt bad, and they continued to play on. So it was unsportsmanlike. But then what Tanganga did was super unsportsmanlike and literally clotheslined him. He could have been a bit more subtle with the foul. I mean, we knew he was going to take him out, but at least be a bit more tact with it, a bit more, It took him out, pretty much clotheslined him. The whole kerfuffle broke out. And then he was under the spotlight. So then when you go in for the second challenge, which he did right after that, and let's be honest, that referee wasn't giving us anything, and he was looking to give them everything. He kind of forced the referee's hand. The referee was never going to back out of that. And I think for us, that was where the game changed. I mean, we were under the cosh anyway, but we were still like Jonathan said, I still felt fairly comfortable at 0-0 with 11 on the pitch. As soon as Tanguy went off, game over. I saw it coming.
Well, Jonathan, obviously, minutes after getting one yellow, he gets the second Tanganga. Again, is that naivety? Is someone needing a word, just saying, look, calm down? Obviously, it's too late now, but that combined with the referee, I wouldn't say he was in Palace's pocket, but he certainly wasn't doing us any favours. So you can sort of see it all unfolding. You've got the Dyer injury, you've got Tanganga getting booked, a Palace crowd heated up, it then gets to a second yellow card. We'll get to the penalty in a moment, but does Tanganga need to just let cooler heads prevail in such a moment?
I actually think he was a little unlucky in the sequence that led to him lunging into the tackle. I mean, he'd read the through ball from Palace, cut it out. Unfortunately, I think it was probably his second touch was a bit too far ahead. And lost possession and then lunged to try and get it back all of a sudden. I don't think that was a red mist lunge. It perhaps wasn't the clearest of thinking, because it's as though he'd forgotten what had happened 2 minutes ago when he clattered Zaha, and the referee clearly gave him a very stern talking to. And he's almost filling in the blanks for the referee's report, isn't he, really? In then lunging in only 2 minutes on. And I know Patrick was very critical about the referee. I didn't think the referee was great. He certainly let an awful lot go in terms of challenges through the back and so on. I know they've been more lenient this season, referees as a whole, but he seemed even like the most lenient we've seen in letting that go. But our guys weren't reacting to that. They were still, falling over like a house of cards, expecting to get the foul that was never going to come. And they'd already seen 3, 4, 5 examples of the referee not giving that. So why are they still rolling over, expecting to get it? I don't think we read the referee very well. And I think the lunge from Tanganga was in a way part of that. It's as though, as I said, Zaha deliberately made a big thing about being clattered, deliberately went into Tanganga's face, I think, to get Tanganga sent off for that original offence, or to get another reaction that would then cause a second yellow, in the whole handbag moment. But ultimately, it is what it is. I wouldn't be too hard on Tanganga for the second challenge. I think the first one, as you said, Carl, that he could have done it in a more subtle way, or was it Patrick?
Yeah,
He could have, he could have stopped him, blocked him, fouled him without actually completely cleaning him out from behind. Although it's always quite nice to see it, particularly if they're in an Arsenal shirt, but really, it's never going to get you any favours. It's never going to get you any favours with the ref, is it? So,
I think as well, Dan, there on that incident, again, I think sometimes that always shows you a lack of a leader on the pitch, because there we would like to have seen one of the more experienced heads go over and just say, right, listen, given the whole melee that's just gone over there and basically, grabbing each other by the throat and everything like that, this ref is going to be watching you like a hawk right now for the next, 5-10 minutes. So listen, you're wound up, but just calm it now, because if you go and the next tackle you make, this ref will be straight on it. And you probably needed, and I'm not, going to say Kane, Højbjerg, someone like that, one of those more experienced players, I think, should have gone. And maybe, unfortunately, that was the shame with Dyer going off, wasn't it? Because maybe Dyer alongside him would have just said, right, listen, settle down. But you've got two young players in Rodon and Tanganga, not one of them a senior player, really. But I think one of those older heads should have taken it on them just to say, right, just stay out of the limelight here for 10 minutes, because this guy will be after you for anything now. And especially don't go near Zaha, because he's going to be looking to go over at the ultimate opportunity. It's cost us, isn't it? But, even if he was wound up that Mora was down injured, as we're saying, the tackle that he made, that was naive, and that's something we've got to hope. And I think he'll learn from, because Tanganga's had a really good start to the season. So, do we just have to put that down to one of them young mistakes, and hopefully he'll have learned the lesson from getting sent off from that.
Well, I think with the second one, he just makes the referee's decision for him, really, doesn't he? Minutes after getting caught in the handbags, having a stern word, just keep your head down.
Right.
Even if it was mistimed, it's a bad touch. There's no real malice in it. It's not really gone out to do him or anything, but, it's an open and shut case, really. And unfortunately, Patrick, that really was the turning point. We spoke about mitigating circumstance of Dyer's injury, then Tanganga gets sent off. You spoke about the referee giving everything to Palace. In this instance, it was the assistant referee straight to their flag with the penalty awards. What can you say, really? Again, a bit open and shut case. What was Ben Davies doing with that jangly arm? Bad positioning from what you consider an experienced defender?
Mate, I was shocked, because, I didn't see it in real time. So I thought, what's the referee flagging? Sorry, the assistant or liner, whoever it was, flagging.
Call it what you want.
Yeah. As soon as they showed the replay, I was like, you know what? I can't legislate or justify for that. His hands out like that, and it's like nowhere near his body. It's not a natural position. It's a stonewall pen, So I don't understand. Davies is not first choice anymore, thank God. But he's an experienced guy. He's played for his country in big occasions, Champions League football. He was part of our, one of our best squads. He was an integral member of that. He should know better than that. And yeah, that kind of put us up against it. Nice, coolly slotted penalty by Zaha. And after that, it was always going to be tough to get back into that game.
Heads went after that, didn't they, Patrick? The heads just went after that. It was just obviously they're just playing the rest of the game in a blur, aren't they? Where it's like, right, this is gone now.
And Carl, you made a great point. At that point, you should have saw Harry Kane, Højbjerg, even maybe Lloris, like getting out there, say, "Come on, let's go. Let's like show some pride or passion. Even if we get beat, let's at least go out fighting." We didn't go out fighting. We just literally fell on our swords, and it was just pathetic. Edouard coming on and scoring the first goal. I don't know how that even crept in. And in the second one, Hugo Lloris chocolate wrist, should have definitely saved that. It's just embarrassing, man. I mean, there's ways to lose. If you're going to lose, cool. But to lose 3-0 to Palace, no disrespect. It's a shocker. It's a shocker.
Agent Davies for Scott.
Scott has chimed in and says that David had a hand, literal and figurative, in each of the 3 goals for Crystal Palace. And Scott is not wrong. But we were also not wrong about Odsonne Edouard, really, because we spoke about him last Friday. And I've always touted him as a backup striker for Tottenham. I don't want to crow too much, because obviously he's got 2 goals against us at the weekend. But it does highlight, why did we get a backup striker over the summer? That was the answer. We've had Danny Ings. That one went. You've got the deadline looming. And you think, actually, 14 million looks an absolute steal right now.
Is that what he was? 14
million. It's absurd, Cole, really, isn't it? And you just think whether he would have changed the game in our favour if it was different. He was wearing white colours on Saturday, but it just highlights we've got to do this all season with a Harry Kane who, whether he wants to be there or not, is not firing on all cylinders at the moment. And you can't really go in with one recognised centre forward. I know someone was chiming to me about Dane Scarlett, and he might be the answer somewhere down the line, but that's a huge question to ask him this season. So, what can we do?
The trouble is now, there's nothing you can do, is there? Let's just say criminally, you've been left short in one position. And we know people will sit there and say, yeah, but you can move Son into the middle if Harry's out and that. But again, Son isn't a natural striker, and you kind of lose a little something from Son, don't you, when you bring him into that forward position? And especially as the fact that then you've got to trust the person you're putting in Son's position. And let's face it, we've got Bergwijn, who's had a better start this season than last season. But again, do we trust him in front of goal? Technically, it is criminal to leave your squad that short. And like as you said, Dan, when you're looking at the figures that those two players just went for, 25 million for Danny Ings, that is nothing in today's market. Absolutely peanuts. You can take a risk of a 25 million player, especially when you consider his pedigree and go, well, listen, that's 10, 15 goals. That's worth 25 million, even if he doesn't play every week. And as you say, there are other options out there that I'm sure you could have gone and got. The board have to look at themselves. If you're sitting down, I don't understand why someone isn't going, please tell me why in a vital position where, as you say, we've got a guy that we know will constantly at some point have some games out where he'll pick up an ankle injury along the way, because that is going to happen. Why has our manager got no one else he can bring in to that position other than shifting players around and makeshifting a player in that position? And people should be asking some serious questions there, going, well, this is just wrong. It's negligence in a way to leave your, if a CEO left his company that negligent and a gap, his head would be put on the block. Unfortunately, we've kind of got used to it, haven't we? I think there is that view that, well, we can just get away with it because Son can just move in there. And I think ultimately that's why they've sat there and gone, well, let's just see if we can get away with it. Is Harry staying? Well, we're all right, but we're not okay. And that is going to come back to bite us across the course of the season at some point. And you're not going to be able to recover that in January, that's for sure.
No, absolutely not. But Jonathan, has this defeat also stoked up the anti-ENIC fire, shall we say? Because again, it was all rosy for the international break. Obviously, people still are on the ENIC outside of the fence, and rightly so if that's their decision. However, you kind of forget when you're top of the league, things aren't that bad. You lose to Palace, and then all of a sudden that penny pinching is top topic again. So is this going to sort of resonate with a lot of fans?
Well, I think the more the season goes on, and the more likely we are to have truly depressing matches like Saturdays. I think the lack of a covering striker and the lack of a creative midfielder will just, it's just throwing more wood on the fire, isn't it, really, for the ENIC out guys. And I'm not sure when you look around at other owners that there are too many that would have done necessarily a better job than ENIC. I mean, as fans, we all want our owners to be incredibly profligate, to spend money like water, and for us to have the pick of the world. But there's only one or two of those actually in the UK, so it's unlikely. There was a time I was living near Portsmouth. Well, Portsmouth managed to find an owner that an Arab owner that had no money, and then they found a Russian owner that had no money. So, sometimes the grass may appear greener. I'm not entirely sure that it always is greener. And if there's no point saying ENIC out unless you know that the alternative that came in actually would be better. I don't think we know that. But yeah, the two...
I think we might have lost Jonathan.
Have you?
Oh, no, he's back. There you are. You're back.
Oh, sorry. My voice probably went too low and the microphone didn't pick it up. I'm sorry. what did you lose me at?
The grass not being greener.
Well, I think that's kind of it. We don't know who our new owner would be to replace Enoch, and until you know that, you can't really make a sensible decision whether it would be a good idea to get rid of Enoch or not. There's no question that in lots of ways they've moved the club forward. Prior to them, I don't think anybody would have argued that we were a top 6 club. And yet, from the outside, people do think we are a top 6 club. Not everybody, but probably the majority do. And that's down to Enoch and what they've done. I'm not an Enoch fan per se, but I just don't think it's fair to criticise them for everything that's wrong with the club, because I don't think they are the root cause of everything that's wrong with the club.
Right, so let's move on, because we need to talk about Harry Kane. I think he played on Saturday, but he wasn't in the box at any point. Patrick, the problem I envisage is that, remember when Christian Eriksen had that kind of 6-month spell where he was at the club, but his head was elsewhere? Yeah. Is this going to be a criticism every time Harry Kane has a bad game? Oh, well, his head's in Manchester. Are we seeing exactly that from Saturday's performance?
I think so. I think it's kind of... it's not really fair to say, because he got 0 service. So other than that point that I mentioned about Skip trying to find him, no one looked for Harry Kane. No one could even get on the ball and had the creativity or the imagination to find him. Kane wasn't his usual self. He didn't drop deep, and Carl alluded to it. Maybe it's because Son wasn't on the pitch, Bergwijn wasn't on the pitch, so there's no runners in behind anyway. So what's the point of him dropping deep? Because as much as I like Lucas Moura, he hasn't really got the intelligence to make those darting runs, has he? We've never seen it before. So maybe Kane just thought, what's the point? And it kind of looked like Kane was like, oh, fuck this. Like, I'm never going to get the ball. Like, I'm just chasing shadows all day. And he looked dejected, and we saw that. So it's too easy to say at the moment, Kane doesn't want to be there, because I think personally, Kane is even if Kane doesn't want to be there for selfish reasons, Kane is a goal machine, and he'll want every record going, and he would work his ass off to get those records. Even from a selfish standpoint, the guy will try and get goals because it's good for him. So and ultimately it's good for Spurs if he does that. But when there's no creativity, there's no one to find him, it's kind of, we might as well have not played with a striker. We should have just played with 10 midfielders or whatever, 6 midfielders, false 9, and see how we go, because Kane was wasted. And he ran around for 90 minutes and just burned his legs out for no reason. I blame Nuno. The blame is on Nuno for me. I can't really blame Kane. Of course, as a player, he could always do more, but what more can he really do when he's not getting the ball in any shape or form?
I think ultimately, though, we have to accept that the guy doesn't want to be there. I think we are seeing, it's clear to see that the guy doesn't want to be here. We know that. And not being funny, you can't blame him, because, again, he'll come away from Saturday going, it's performances like that are why I don't want to be at this club anymore, because the club is not going to match what I want to match. Yes, we've had a couple of injuries, but if that's what happens after a couple of injuries, then this side is in big trouble this season. So that Harry doesn't want to be there. But again, I think people are picking a game where the team was so bad that, it would be harsh to criticise a striker, because what was he meant to do? Go and play left back, right back, centre half, centre midfield, just to try and make something happen, And then, of course, if he dropped that far back, you'd have had people going, well, that's not what we want Harry Kane doing. We want him up top. It's a hard one to throw at him, but we will see this after every game. If he doesn't score and we lose, people will say, well, what's Harry Kane doing? But we have to accept the guy doesn't want to be here. But I'm like with Patrick, if he plays and we have the right quality around him, he'll still score goals. He won't just purposely miss sitters because he wants Shearer's record. He wants to be Tottenham's all-time goal scoring, player. What he did if he doesn't leave. So that guy won't miss chances if he's giving them, but you've got to get enough of the ball to him in the right areas, and unfortunately, we didn't do that Saturday.
Well, Jonathan, are we now at a point where Kane's made a rod for his own back in that he can't have a bad game? Because if he has a bad game, everyone says he's checked out. If he does his usual goal scoring attributes, then it's just Harry Kane being Harry Kane. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say he's made his bed, he's got to lie in it, but he has created a scenario for himself, hasn't he? And the only way he can really just carry on as normal, scoring goals. But if he scores lots of goals, Man City are backing for him. So it's kind of like, well, what do we do with him, really? It's a nice problem to have, of course. You'd rather have him than not have him, but you'd rather have him of last season and in that sort of goal-scoring groove all the time.
I think the answer with Kane is, as it always has been, you've got to feed him. I mean, if there's no point having a centre forward, particularly someone with his strike rate, if you don't get the ball to him. And then if he's not getting the passes, not getting the crosses coming to him, as of late, he started to drop deep to look for the ball. But when Son is on the pitch, at least there's somebody to play the ball forward to. I didn't really understand why he was dropping deep at the weekend, because for what? For whom? Because there was nobody to put in anyway. So it was all a bit self-defeating. And there were a couple of occasions, very few, but a couple of occasions in the second half where people did get forward down the touchline. And Reguilon, I remember at least on one occasion, and there was nobody in the penalty box. And that's exactly where you want Kane to be, but he's been divvying about somewhere near the centre line. And then it really just becomes a whole complete downward spiral, isn't it? Because there's nobody's feeding Kane. He drops deep. When somebody does go to look to feed Kane, he's too deep to actually get on the end of it. It's just a horrible circle without end. And I think that's where we went to in the second half on Saturday. I'm afraid it was abject. There was almost zero creativity throughout the team, and that was in the first half too. But it just seemed like in the second half, I thought Nuno looked a bit like a rabbit in the headlights, about sort of damned if I do, damned if I don't. But even when they scored, why not put Heel on, see if he can have a run and set Harry up in the middle? What have he got to lose, for heaven's sake? And in the end, we lost 3-0, so nothing would have been lost.
Carl, is it fair to say that Son can get by without Kane, Kane can't get by without Son?
Well, I guess the biggest problem is that Son, I guess, can get by without Kane because he then becomes the focal point and everything goes through him. I think, unfortunately for Kane, Son is the man he'll look for to kind of also, if Kane isn't going to score, then you've got his creative spark, but he needs that player like Son on the pitch. And if he's not there, as Patrick said, Bergwijn, the jury's still out as to whether he can be clinical enough in front of goal and be good enough to kind of mimic what Son does on the other side. And as we said earlier, Moura is great with the ball at his feet, but he hasn't got that intelligence of when to time a run over the top so that Kane can then go, okay, well, if Son's not there, Moura becomes the man I look for those balls over the top or through the middle of the defence, and he's going to run onto it. So we do have a problem there, don't we? I'm not so sure. Son's been great. I saw a lot of stuff at the weekend as people now suddenly, because Kane has wanted out, people now suddenly came, well, Son's the best player we've got in the squad anyway. So Kane doesn't listen. Kane is still the best player we've got at the club. That's make no mistake about that. And, without Kane last season, Son would have been nowhere near as effective as he actually was last season, because when you look at the assists, if Kane isn't setting Son up for the goals that he does, Son's numbers drop drastically. And again, if Kane leaves, is Son going to be as effective? Because who has got the quality to do what Harry Kane does on the ball when they look for him? So they both need each other. We've just got to try and start making, obviously it's just bad news, Son being out, wasn't it, after that international break. But again, it just highlights, doesn't it, that you need a creative spark and a creative player that can take the game by the scruff of the neck and say, well, hang on, you two are going to live off of me because I'm going to be your creator. It's not happening. And unfortunately, as Patrick said earlier, I think this is going to be a long season, I'm afraid. And I think we're going to have a season of some real highs where we think, okay, this is better. And then I think we're going to have a season of some real lows, because there'll be performances and results. And I think we could see one coming in our next game against Chelsea where people come away going, wow, this is not going to be pretty this season.
Well, that's next week. Patrick, you've got about 2 minutes. Emerson Royal, talk to me. What do you think of him?
I thought he did all right, to be fair. I thought he played okay. A few people were slating him. I thought that was quite harsh. He was thrown into the fire, thrown into the deep end. Zaha was on stuff this weekend. We haven't seen that kind of Zaha for a long time. I thought he did okay. He's probably been with us for a week or two. Hardly speaks English. He looked decent in the first half. Zaha definitely got the better of him in the second half. I think he got a bit too touch tight in the second half, and that's when Zaha started to spin him. So then somebody should have told him, or he should have had the nous to step back a bit, let Zaha get the ball and then beat him instead of being too touch tight and he just gets spun. Thought he played okay. He looks decent, but I was a bit disappointed because sometimes when he got the ball in an attacking area, he went backwards instead of trying to take a man on or whip something in. So some positives there, but obviously, yeah, we've got to see him. It's a bit too early to say. That was a difficult first game for him, but I overall, I'm pleased with what I saw in the first half.
Right, that'll do. That a stunning assessment there, Patrick. On that note, I think we'll wrap things up. So that is it for this week. Actually, not for the week. It's for tonight, because on Friday we'll be back with another preview show. Yeah, we're going to do it all over again. It's the Chelsea preview, lunchtime. I don't know the exact time, whenever we're free. So we'll put some links out. Get clicking, get watching, get subscribing, more importantly. And now I need to thank my 3 Pod Squad members for this evening. Jonathan, thanks for making your debut. I hope you enjoyed that one.
I really did. I had a good time. Thank you, guys, and thanks for your support off the air as well.
Not a problem. We'll have you back later in the season. Patrick, a top performance this evening. Loving your work as always.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, difficult times, but we're still here. We're still smiling, so it's all good.
And Carl, thanks for running the channels this evening and wearing that captain's armband.
Free therapy, Dan. It means, everyone's has to stop hiding in the house now after that performance. They can all come out again, and we'll show some positivity. We got Thursday, which I'm sure will be okay, and then we look ahead to Chelsea.
Oh, I forgot about Thursday. Yeah, we'll talk about that on Friday as well. Such has been my love for Tottenham. I completely forgot we're in the Europa Conference League. So Friday we'll have a little chat about that also. I'm off to have some night nurse. So with that said, it just leaves me to say that my name's Dan Tracy. And until next time, come on you Spurs.